I never imagined I'd be the kind of man who'd be sitting alone in an empty house, nursing a glass of whiskey and wondering how my life had unraveled so quickly. But here I was. A month ago, I had a wife, a marriage. Now all I had were divorce, papers, and a half-empty bottle. Lena had left me, not for irreconcilable differences or because we'd grown apart. No, she left me for another man, a wealthy, adventurous man named Vincent Harper. The kind of guy who chartered yachts for fun and sipped champagne before noon, the kind of guy who made men like me, regular, hard-working, predictable, look dull. The last thing she said before slamming the door? I'm done living a boring life, Noah. I'm going to live, to feel alive, and you'll be nothing but a memory. Then she was gone, off to the Caribbean with her new lover. I expected to feel anger, pain, but as I sat there, staring at the divorce papers, something else crept in. Curiosity, because something about this didn't add up. The investigation begins. I knew Lena well. Too well. And despite her grand speech about wanting adventure, there was something off about the timing of this affair. For one, Vincent Harper didn't exist. I checked. No social media, no business records, no tax filings. The man she left me for was a ghost. So I did what any man with nothing left to lose would do. I hired a private investigator, a friend of mine from college, Daniel Grayson, who had a talent for uncovering secrets. And within 2 days, he had one hell of a revelation. Lena wasn't the one who found Vincent. Vincent found her. A web of lies, Daniel dug deeper, following paper, trails, tracking Lena's movements before she left. What he found chilled me. Vincent Harper, if that was even his real name, was connected to multiple disappearances. Wealthy women, all of them recently divorced or separated, vanishing on a luxurious vacations with him. No bodies found, no traces left, just gone. I felt my pulse hammer against my ribs. Lena thought she was running toward excitement. She was running toward death. I had to stop her. The chase using a hacked itinerary Daniel pulled from her emails. I booked the fastest flight to St. Lucia, where she was vacationing. It was risky, and there was no guarantee I'd get there in time, but I had to try. By the time I landed, Lena and Vincent were already out at sea on a rented private yacht. The same pattern as the other women. The last trip they ever took. I didn't have time for police. The bureaucracy would kill her faster than the murderer she was sailing with. So I hired a boat. Night fell as I neared the yacht, adrenaline flooding my veins. From the distance, I could see them on the deck. Lena, smiling, drinking. Vincent, laughing. It almost looked romantic, until he moved behind her, too close, his hand reaching for something at his waist, a knife. The truth revealed. I didn't think. I acted. I fired a warning shot into the air. The crack of the gun echoed over the water. Vincent froze. Lena stumbled back, confusion flashing into horror as she saw the knife, and then pure chaos. Vincent lunged for her. I fired again, this time hitting him in the shoulder. He screamed, dropping the blade as blood darkened his crisp white shirt. Within minutes, Daniel, who had alerted the authorities, arrived with the Coast Guard. Lena collapsed into my arms, shaking, realizing she had barely escaped becoming the next name on a long list of missing women. Vincent. Turns out, his real name was Elias Vaughn, a con man turned serial killer who preyed on lonely divorced women. His plan was simple: love bomb them, lure them on a trip, kill them at sea where no one could find the body, and inherit their wealth through forged documents. Lena had been his next victim. The aftermath. 3 weeks later, she stood at my doorstep, eyes full of shame and something else, something deeper. Noah, she swallowed. You saved my life, and I don't deserve it. I studied her, the woman who had once betrayed me. The woman who had almost died because of it. No, I said, stepping aside so she could enter. You don't. But that doesn't mean I wanted you dead. She didn't ask for forgiveness, and I didn't offer it. But as we sat in silence, both haunted by what had happened, one thing was clear. The past had shattered. But the future, that was still unwritten. The end. A new beginning? Or a new lie? The days after Elias Vaughn, were a blur of police interrogations, news reports, and lawyers. Lena became an overnight headline. Escaped socialite speaks out. How one woman survived the Caribbean. Killer. I watched from the sidelines as she told her story on television. Tears. Regret. A carefully crafted narrative of a woman who had been manipulated, deceived. I should have felt relief that she was alive. That justice was being served. But something gnawed at me. Something about the way she told her story. The inconsistencies. I replayed the news interview in my head. I never suspected a thing, she had said. He was so charming, so convincing. I thought he loved me. But that wasn't true. I remembered the fights we had before she left. The expensive gifts that started showing up at our house months before she even filed for divorce. The late-night phone calls, the secrecy. Lena knew Elias, long before she claimed. And then there was the biggest red flag, her money. Lena had access to my accounts during the divorce. Yet the moment Elias was arrested, she suddenly had millions sitting untouched in offshore accounts. How, unless she had been in on it? Confrontation. A week later, I found her at a hotel bar, drowning in whiskey. The same way I had been. Not so, long ago. Enjoying freedom? I asked, sliding into the seat beside her. She stiffened. Noah, let's skip the pleasantries. I leaned in. Tell me the truth. You knew who he was, didn't you? She went pale, fingers tightening around her glass. That's insane. He tried to kill me. Only because he realized you were going to betray him first. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I knew I was right. You were working with him, weren't you? Maybe at first you thought you'd just play the role of the clueless wife. Let him take rich women, steal their money. But then you got greedy. You wanted out, with his fortune. Silence. Then, Lena smiled, not a warm smile. Not relief, but something cold. You were always too smart for your own good, Noah. My stomach twisted. She wasn't denying it. She had helped Elias lure those women, maybe even set them up, until she saw an opportunity to double-cross him and walk away with everything. She had played him. She had played me. And now she was free. The final twist. The bartender dropped the bill in front of us. I reached into my jacket, pulled out a flash drive, and slid it across the bar. This has everything, Lena, I said. Bank transactions, emails, a full confession from one of Elias's old associates. Her face didn't change. So what now? She asked, swirling the last of her whiskey. You turn me in? I held her gaze. Then I stood up, tossing a few bills onto the counter. No, she blinked. You're going to do it yourself. I leaned down, close enough that she could hear the steel in my voice. Because if you don't, someone worse than me will come looking for you. Lena's breath hitched. She knew. I wasn't bluffing. Elias Vaughn had partners, people who didn't take kindly to thieves. I walked away, never looking back. Epilogue. The final news report. A month later, I saw it on the news. Socialite Lena Carter, arrested, shocking new revelations in the Caribbean killer case. They had found her offshore accounts, the emails, the proof. She had turned herself in, exactly as I knew she would. The past was finally buried. And as I watched the news, sipping my whiskey, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Closure. The end. A past that won't stay. Buried closure. That's what I told myself. I watched Lena's trial from a distance, never stepping foot in the courtroom. She took a plea deal, serving 15 years in exchange for exposing the network Elias Vaughn was working with. I should have moved on, and for a while, I did, until the letter arrived. The letter from prison came on a Tuesday morning. No return address, just my name scrawled across the envelope. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Noah, you were right, but there's more you don't know. Be careful, they haven't forgotten you. L. My blood ran cold. I wanted to ignore it. Pretend. It was just another one of her games. But then, 2 days later, Daniel Grayson, my old friend and investigator, was found dead in his apartment, shot twice in the chest, execution style, and just like that, I realized the past wasn't finished with me yet. The return of the ghosts, I dug into Daniel's notes, retracing the case. The deeper I went, the clearer it became. Elias Vaughn hadn't been working alone. Lena had sold someone out to save herself. And now, they were tying up loose ends, and I was next. The hunt begins. Again. I left my apartment that night with only one goal: find them before they find me. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. To be continued. The shadow war I knew I had two choices. Run or fight. Running would buy me time. Fighting might buy me answers. I chose the latter. Daniel's secret files. Before he died, Daniel had been digging into Elias Vaughn's network. His office was trashed. When the police found him, but I knew him well, Daniel always had backups. I broke into his office at midnight, moving quickly. The cops had sealed the place, but I had an old key. I searched everywhere. Nothing. Then I remembered, Daniel always joked about keeping his secrets close to his chest. I checked his desk drawer, a burner phone, a single note taped to the back. If I'm dead, start with Verona. Verona. An island. One of Elias Vaughn's old hideouts. This wasn't just about Lena. This was bigger. A dead man's lead? I booked a flight under a fake name. Cash. No credit cards. No digital footprint. When I landed in Verona, the heat was suffocating. The kind of place where people disappeared without a trace. I checked into a run-down hotel and started asking questions. Too many. By the third night, I knew someone was watching me, and then, at 3 a.m., they made their move. Ambush. I barely had time to react before my hotel door burst open. 2 men dressed in black, guns drawn. I dived for the nightstand, yanking the drawer open, just as a silencer hissed through the air. The bullet missed my head by inches. I grabbed the only weapon I had, a rusty lamp, and smashed it into the first guy's face. He staggered back, cursing. The second man lunged. I twisted, grabbing his wrist, forcing the gun up. Bang! A muffled gunshot. The bullet went through his own shoulder. He screamed. The first guy recovered fast, swinging a knife. I barely dodged, feeling the blade graze my ribs. Then, a new sound, another gunshot. Not mine. The first man collapsed, blood pooling beneath him. The second turned in panic before a bullet took him too. Silence, and then footsteps. An old enemy returns. She stepped into the room, lowering her gun. Lena, my ex-wife. The woman who betrayed me. The woman I had sent to prison. She smirked, tucking the gun into her belt. Told you they wouldn't forget about you, Noah. I stared at her. What the hell are you doing here? She leaned against the wall, watching me. Saving your life. A pause. And if you want to survive, you'll need to help me finish what we started. The truth. We never knew. Lena wasn't here for revenge. She was on the run, too. The people Elias worked for, the ones she betrayed, were coming. after her. And she knew something I didn't, something about why Elias was killing those women. "It wasn't just about money, Noah," she said, voice low. "It was about power, influence, and it goes deeper than we ever imagined." I didn't trust her, but at that moment, I realized something. If I wanted to live long enough to learn the truth, I had no choice. I had to work with my ex-wife. To be continued. The Unholy Alliance. Lena and I sat in the ruined hotel room, bodies still warm on the floor, the stench of gunpowder heavy in the air. I should have turned her in. She was a criminal, a liar, but I couldn't ignore the truth. She had just saved my life, and if what she said was real, if this was bigger than Elias Vaughn's murder for money scheme, I needed answers. "Talk," I said, gripping my side where the knife had grazed me. "What do you know?" Lena smirked, pulling a flash drive from her pocket. "Everything. The real conspiracy, we left the hotel, ditching our passports and switching cars. By dawn, we were in a safe house, a rundown villa on the edge of Verona. Lena plugged the flash drive into a laptop. And what I saw? It changed everything. The real reason women were dying, Elias Vaughn wasn't just a serial killer. He was part of a global operation, a network of billionaires, corrupt officials, and shadow figures who used people like him to make their problems disappear. The women he killed? They weren't random rich divorcees. They were witnesses, whistleblowers. They were all connected to someone powerful, Lena said, scrolling through names. Each one was about to expose something: financial fraud, political deals, offshore banking, scams. Elias was their cleanup man. My stomach twisted. "So what were you to him?" I asked. Lena went silent. Then she looked at me. A loose end. The truth about Lena, I thought Lena was just another victim, seduced by a con man, betrayed, left for dead. I was wrong. She had worked for Elias at first, helping him pick targets. At first, she thought it was just financial cons, setting up fake marriages, bleeding wealthy men dry. Then, she saw the truth. She tried to leave. But Elias never let anyone leave. That's why she had turned on him, why she had manipulated me into saving her. And now the people Elias worked for, the real power behind everything, knew she was still alive, and that meant we were both on the kill list, a plan that could get us killed. "So what's the play?" I asked, watching her closely. "You want to run? Forever? Or do you want to end this?" Lena smirked. "Oh, we're going to end it?" She pulled up a name on the laptop, one of the richest men in the world, a shipping tycoon, a man connected to every crime syndicate you could think of. "Meet Alexander Grayson," she said, "the man who gave Elias his orders, the man who now wants us dead." I frowned. "Grayson? As in—" Lena nodded. "Daniel's father." My breath caught. Daniel, my best friend, the investigator who got killed, was the son of the man behind everything. No wonder he was murdered. I clenched my fists. This wasn't just survival anymore, this was revenge. "Where do we find him?" I asked. Lena smiled, a wicked, dangerous smile. "He's hosting a gala next week, on a private island. We get in, we expose everything, and we bring him down." I exhaled, slowly. This was suicide, but I had already lost everything. I had nothing left to lose. Let's do it. To be continued. The invitation to death getting into Alexander Grayson's gala wasn't going to be easy. The man was paranoid, and for good reason. He controlled an empire built on murder, blackmail, and corruption. Security would be airtight. Armed guards, surveillance, background checks on every guest. But Lena, she already had a plan. The art of infiltration. "Grayson only trusts the untouchable, the rich, the famous, the elite," Lena said, tapping the laptop screen. "So we're going in as exactly that." She pulled up two names, Elliot and Sophia Mercer. A billionaire couple, real estate moguls, who were conveniently missing at sea after their yacht vanished 2 months ago. The world thought they were dead. Grayson didn't know yet, and Lena, she had their identities. "We become them," she said, a glint of mischief in her eyes. "We walk right through the front door." I stared at her. "You're insane," she smirked. "And yet, you're still here." I sighed. She had me there. A dangerous makeover. It took us 4 days to get everything ready. Lena had doctored passports, credit cards, fake social media activity. She was frighteningly good at this. By the time she was done, we weren't just using fake names. We were Elliot and Sophia Mercer. And next week, we were walking into the lion's den. Welcome to the endgame. The night of the gala arrived, a private island off the coast of Italy, exclusive, only for the world's most powerful criminals. We stepped off the yacht dressed to kill. Lena in a blood-red gown, diamonds at her neck. Me in a sharp black suit, looking like I belonged. Guards checked our credentials. No issues. Then we were inside, stepping into a world of power, corruption, and death. Lena's hand brushed mine. A warning. "We're in," she whispered. I nodded, scanning the room. Then, my blood turned to ice, because across the ballroom, standing near Alexander Grayson himself, was a man who should have been dead. A man I watched die, Elias Vaughn, to be continued. The ghost who lived, Elias Vaughn. The man I watched die. The man whose death should have ended this nightmare. Yet there he was, alive, well, and standing next to Alexander Grayson, sipping whiskey like he didn't have a grave waiting for him. Lena's fingers dug into my wrist. "Stay calm," she whispered, smiling at a passing guest. "Calm? I was supposed to stay calm when the man who had tried to kill her, who had destroyed my life, was standing 20 feet away." Lena's lips barely moved. We don't panic. We adapt. And she was right. If Elias was here, then this was bigger than we thought, and we were already in the middle of it. The game of masks. The gala was a masterpiece of deception, a room full of criminals playing dress-up as royalty. Deals were being made over champagne. Murders were being planned between dances, and we had to blend in. Lena kept up her act perfectly, gliding through conversations like she had been born to this world. Me? I was too busy keeping one eye on Elias. He hadn't seen us yet, but it was only a matter of time. Then, Lena stiffened. "Grayson is heading upstairs," she murmured. "Our chance." The real mission wasn't just about surviving this party. It was about getting into Grayson's private office and exposing the entire operation. And right now, he was walking right into it. Lena flashed me a wicked grin. Time to crash a meeting. The upstairs trap slipping away unnoticed wasn't easy, but Lena had a talent for distractions. She whispered something to a Russian arms dealer, then laughed, touching his arm just long enough to make his wife furious. As soon as the shouting started, we were gone. We moved through the halls, quiet, unseen. Then, Grayson's office, locked. Obviously. Lena knelt, pulling a small tool from her clutch. "Keep watch," she murmured. I turned and froze. Because standing at the end of the hall, watching us with a slow, amused smile, was Elias Vaughn. "The devil returns, Noah," he said, voice dripping with mockery. I didn't hesitate. I threw a punch. He dodged, stepping back, laughing. Now, he chided. "Is that any way to greet an old friend?" Lena cursed, still working the lock. "You're supposed to be dead," I growled. Elias grinned. "Funny," he said. "I was just about to say the same thing about you." Then, before I could react, he pulled a gun, pointed it at Lena. "Step away from that door, sweetheart." Lena went rigid. I clenched my fists. We were trapped, and Elias Vaughn was about to show us exactly why he was still alive. To be continued. The devil's bargain. Elias Vaughn stood there, gun steady, his grin lazy, like he'd already won. "Step away from the door, Lena," he repeated, voice smooth, controlled. Lena didn't move. Her fingers, inches from the lockpick in her clutch, flexed. Slightly, she was calculating. I knew that look. She was about to do something reckless. "Elias," I said, my voice calm. "How the hell are you alive?" He smirked. "Did you really think Alexander Grayson would let me die?" he mused. "You underestimated who I worked for, who I still work for." My stomach twisted. Grayson hadn't just employed Elias. He had saved him, kept him alive, which meant the entire trial, the conviction, the plea deal, Lena's betrayal. It had all been a game. "You set us up," I realized, my voice cold. Elias chuckled. "Not quite. You set yourselves up. You thought you could outplay the people who run the world?" He tilted his head. That was cute. I fought the rage boiling inside me. "So what now?" I asked, buying time. "You kill us? Here? At Grayson's own party?" Elias sighed. "Oh, Noah. If I wanted you dead, you'd already be bleeding out on this very expensive carpet." Then his expression shifted. Serious, dangerous. "Grayson doesn't want you dead," he said. "Not yet. The offer." We couldn't refuse. Lena and I exchanged a look. We both knew what this meant. Grayson wanted something, and when men like him wanted something, it was never good. "You're coming with me," Elias said. "Both of you, now." He motioned with the gun. Lena's lips parted like she wanted to argue, but I gave a tiny shake of my head. Not now. We'd play along. For now. The king of the underworld, Elias, led us through. A set of hidden doors, down a corridor that smelled of cigar smoke and expensive cologne. Then, into a private lounge. And there he was. Alexander Grayson. Billionaire, power broker. The man behind everything. He sat in a leather chair, a glass of whiskey in one hand, watching us with cold amusement. "Noah Carter," he mused, swirling his drink. "You have been quite the nuisance." Lena stiffened beside me. Grayson's gaze slid to her. "And you, my dear? I must say I expected better." Lena said nothing. Her jaw clenched so tight I thought she'd crack a tooth. Grayson exhaled. "But let's not dwell on past betrayals." He leaned forward. "I have a proposal. A deal with the devil." "You both walk out of here alive," Grayson said, "but only if you do one job for me." My stomach dropped. Lena spoke first. "And if we refuse?" Grayson sighed, shaking his head. "Lena, Lena, Lena." He sipped his whiskey. "Why? Do people always ask questions they already know the answer to?" A door opened behind us. 2 armed guards stepped in. Lena's fingers twitched. I felt it, the urge to fight, to run, to do something. Grayson just smiled. "You're not leaving here until you say yes." "So why don't we skip the theatrics?" I clenched my fists. We were trapped, and we only had one move left. "What's the job?" I asked. Grayson's grin widened. "Smart man." Then he leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "I want you to kill someone for me." Lena stilled beside me. I exhaled sharply. I should have seen that coming. "Who?" I asked. Grayson's smile turned serpentine. "Someone who knows too much. Someone who is problematic." Then he tossed a photograph onto the table. I looked down, and my blood ran cold, because staring back at me was a picture of Daniel Grayson, the son he was supposed to have already killed, to be continued. The job that shouldn't exist, Daniel Grayson. The man whose death started everything. The friend I thought I had buried. Yet there he was, frozen in time, in a grainy surveillance photo, alive, and his own father wanted him dead. Lena's nails dug into my arm. "Noah," she murmured, low enough that only I could hear. I barely registered it. I was staring at the impossible. Grayson exhaled, swirling his whiskey. "Surprised?" he mused. "I imagine you must be. After all, you thought he was already gone." I forced myself to look at him. "Why?" I asked. "Why is your own son still alive?" Grayson smirked. "Oh, he was supposed to die. Just like you. Just like Lena." He took a slow sip. "But people can be disappointing." My mind raced. Daniel had been investigating Grayson before he died. Was that it? Had he survived somehow and gone underground? Lena spoke, her voice cool and lethal. "You want us to do your dirty work because Elias failed, don't you?" Grayson chuckled. "Oh, I never rely on just one man." He glanced at Elias, who stood beside him, silent, watching me like a predator. "But when mistakes happen, they must be corrected." His eyes locked onto me. "Find my son." His smile sharpened. "And finish what should have been done a long time ago. An impossible choice. I knew what this was. A trap. Grayson didn't just want Daniel dead, he wanted us dead too. Send us after his son, let us do the dirty work, then wipe us off the board before we could use whatever Daniel knew against him. Classic Grayson move. "And if we refuse?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Grayson sighed, disappointed. "Noah," he said, shaking his head. "Why do people always ask questions they already know the answer to?" A subtle nod. The guards moved closer. Lena's hand brushed against mine. A warning, a signal. She had a plan. I swallowed hard. "Fine," I said. "We'll find him." Grayson grinned, all satisfaction and venom. Good man. I wasn't good, but I was still breathing. For now. The Great Escape. We left the gala under armed escort, escorted to a private jet, handed everything we'd need to track Daniel down. Grayson thought he had us under control. That was his first mistake, because the moment we were in the air, alone, with Elias Vaughn sitting across from us, gun in his lap, Lena made her move. The Skyfall betrayal. One moment, Elias was watching us. The next, Lena was on him. She moved fast, grabbing his wrist, yanking the gun, twisting his arm so hard I heard something snap. Elias roared, but I was already moving. I grabbed his head and slammed it into the seat. He crumpled. Not dead, but out. "You didn't kill him," Lena noted. "We might need him," I muttered, already pulling open the plane's emergency hatch panel. She blinked. "Wait, what are you—" I pulled a parachute from storage and tossed one to her. Her eyes widened. "Noah, we're not landing this plane." I strapped the parachute on. "Grayson thinks we're his pawns." I pulled the hatch release. The cabin exploded with wind. "It's time we remind him that we're not." Lena cursed, then grinned. "I hate how much I like this plan." And then, before we could think too hard about how stupidly dangerous this was, we jumped. To be continued. The job that shouldn't exist, Daniel Grayson. The man whose death started everything. The friend I thought I had buried. Yet there he was, frozen in time, in a grainy surveillance photo, alive, and his own father wanted him dead. Lena's nails dug into my arm. "Noah," she murmured, low enough that only I could hear. I barely registered it. I was staring at the impossible. Grayson exhaled, swirling his whiskey. "Surprised?" he mused. "I imagine you must be. After all, you thought he was already gone." I forced myself to look at him. "Why?" I asked. "Why is your own son still alive?" Grayson smirked. "Oh, he was supposed to die. Just like you. Just like Lena." He took a slow sip. "But people can be disappointing. My mind raced. Daniel had been investigating Grayson before he died. Was that it? Had he survived somehow and gone underground? Lena spoke, her voice cool and lethal. "You want us to do your dirty work because Elias failed, don't you?" Grayson chuckled. "Oh, I never rely on just one man." He glanced at Elias, who stood beside him, silent, watching me like a predator. But when mistakes happen, they must be corrected. His eyes locked onto me. "Find my son." His smile sharpened. "And finish what should have been done a long time ago, an impossible choice." I knew what this was. A trap. Grayson didn't just want Daniel dead, he wanted us dead too. Send us after his son, let us do the dirty work, then wipe us off the board before we could use whatever Daniel knew against him. Classic Grayson move. "And if we refuse?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Grayson sighed, disappointed. "Noah," he said, shaking his head. "Why do people always ask questions they already know the answer to?" A subtle nod. The guards moved closer. Lena's hand brushed against mine, a warning, a signal. She had a plan. I swallowed hard. "Fine," I said. "We'll find him." Grayson grinned, all satisfaction and venom. Good man. I wasn't good, but I was still breathing. For now. The Great Escape. We left the gala under armed escort, escorted to a private jet, handed everything we'd need to track Daniel down. Grayson thought he had us under control. That was his first mistake, because the moment we were in the air, alone, with Elias Vaughn sitting across from us, gun in his lap, Lena made her move. The Skyfall betrayal. One moment, Elias was watching us. The next. Lena was on him. She moved fast, grabbing his wrist, yanking the gun, twisting his arm so hard I heard something snap. Elias roared, but I was already moving. I grabbed his head and slammed it into the seat. He crumpled. Not dead, but out. "You didn't kill him," Lena noted. "We might need him," I muttered, already pulling open the plane's emergency hatch panel. She blinked. "Wait, what are you—" I pulled a parachute from storage and tossed one to her. Her eyes widened. "Noah, we're not landing this plane." I strapped the parachute on. "Grayson thinks we're his pawns." I pulled the hatch release. The cabin exploded with wind. "It's time we remind him that we're not." Lena cursed, then grinned. I hate how much I like this plan. Falling into fire. The wind howled as we plummeted through the sky. Lena's parachute snapped open first, a stark red against the black of the night. I counted 1, 2, then yanked my own cord. A violent jolt. The world lurched as the parachute deployed, slowing my descent. Above us, the plane shrank into the distance, still on course for Grayson's trap. And Elias Vaughn, he was still on board. "Think he survives the crash?" Lena called over the wind. I snorted. "Knowing Elias, I'd bet on it." She didn't argue. Instead, she pointed toward the dark stretch of coastline ahead. "We aim for the beach. Hope we don't land in the ocean." I adjusted my chute, angling toward land. Because the next phase of this game, we had to find Daniel Grayson before his father did, and hope to God he was still on our side. The ghost in the shadows. We landed hard, rolling in the sand, but we were alive. I unbuckled my chute, breathing deep. The air was thick with salt, the sound of crashing waves almost deceptively peaceful. "Where the hell are we?" Lena asked, brushing sand off her dress. I pulled a burner phone from my pocket, one I had grabbed off Elias before we ditched the plane. Flipped. It opened. No lock. Amateur mistake. A quick scan of messages, and there it was, a location pin. South of Naples, an abandoned monastery in the hills, and one last message from Grayson himself. "Find him. Do not fail me again." I turned to Lena. "I know where Daniel is." Her eyes gleamed in the darkness. "Then let's go find the dead man. A meeting with a ghost, The monastery was silent, its crumbling walls bathed in moonlight. We moved carefully, weapons drawn. If Grayson's men had found Daniel first, this could be a bloodbath. Then, "Took you long enough." The voice was familiar. Turned, heart pounding, and there he was, Daniel Grayson. He stepped from the shadows, alive, real, and very muck. And then, before we could think too hard about how stupidly dangerous this was, we jumped, to be continued. Daniel Grayson stood before us, his silhouette cast in the eerie glow of the moonlight, the abandoned monastery looming behind him like a forgotten relic. The last time I had seen him, he had been in a body bag, presumed dead. Now, here he was, alive, looking every bit the haunted heir to the Grayson Empire. His face was thinner, the wear of survival evident in the sharpness of his features. But there was no mistaking it. He was still Grayson's blood. "So you're the ones who decided to drop in uninvited?" Daniel asked, his voice rough but surprisingly calm. He glanced at Lena, and then back at me, his gaze calculating. "I didn't think anyone would make it out alive from that mess." Lena shot me a look. "We're used to making the impossible happen." She holstered her gun but kept her hand close. I nodded. "But now we need answers. Why didn't Grayson finish the job? What's your role in all this?" Daniel's lips curled into a wry smile. "Grayson doesn't finish things. He just moves on to the next thing." He paused, the smile fading. "I knew too much, I still do." My stomach twisted. This was more than a family drama. This was about a power struggle that could unravel everything. The truth in the shadows. We walked deeper into the monastery, past the crumbling stone walls and faded tapestries. The place felt as abandoned as the secrets Daniel was about to share. He led us to a small, dimly lit room, a hidden sanctuary, as if he'd been living here for years, surviving, plotting, waiting. Daniel gestured for us to sit. We did, warily, eyes darting around for any signs of traps. "Here's the thing," Daniel began, his voice low, intense. "Grayson never wanted me dead. Not really. He needed me out of the way for a while, for his plans to go forward. But when I went missing, everyone thought I was dead. And that's when things got complicated." I leaned in. "Complicated how?" Daniel's eyes glinted in the shadows. "Complicated enough that people like Elias Vaughn started to play both sides." Lena's breath caught. "Vaughn? I thought he was loyal to Grayson." He was. Daniel's laugh was bitter. "But Vaughn has his own ambitions. And when he saw an opening, well, let's just say he doesn't have the same loyalty to Grayson that most people think he does." I narrowed my eyes. "Vaughn's been playing us all this time," Daniel nodded. "Exactly. Vaughn manipulated Grayson's people. He made sure that the entire situation, the fake death, the investigation, the betrayals, worked in his favor. And when you two showed up, trying to dig through the mess, you became pawns in his game." The betrayal unfolds. Lena's fists clenched. "So it was all a setup." Daniel leaned forward. "Not exactly. Vaughn wasn't the only player. Grayson's empire isn't just about money, it's about control, blackmail, leverage, and manipulation of the highest order. But Vaughn was the one who saw me as an obstacle. He wanted me out of the picture for his own reasons. Grayson, he didn't care whether I was alive or dead. He needed me gone long enough for him to tighten his grip on everything." "But why didn't you just run?" I asked. "If you knew what was going on, why stay hidden?" Daniel sighed, looking tired. "Because I couldn't. I wasn't just hiding from Grayson. I was hiding from Vaughn, too. And there were people who wanted me dead. Real people. People who could bring Grayson to his knees." Lena leaned forward, her voice intense. "Who?" Daniel hesitated, glancing at the door as if expecting someone to burst in at any second. A group of people who call themselves the Syndicate. They're the real power behind Grayson's throne. They want control, and they see Grayson as a stepping stone. Nothing more. But they couldn't move on him. Until I was out of the way, I swallowed hard. The Syndicate, a shadowy group, rumored to be involved in every illicit enterprise from arms dealing to human trafficking. Grayson might have been the face of the criminal world, but this group was the true puppet master. And now they know you're alive, I asked. What happens now? Daniel's eyes darkened. It's too late to run now. They've been hunting me for months. And now that I've come out of hiding, they're going to want something. Something I can't give them. Lena raised an eyebrow. What could they possibly want from you? Daniel stood, pacing. Power, leverage, the key to Grayson's empire. He turned sharply, his gaze fixed on me. But there's something else, something they have that could bring everything down. A list. I frowned. A list? Daniel nodded. A list of everyone who's been compromised by Grayson's empire. The people. He's blackmailed, the ones he controls. If the Syndicate gets their hands on that list, they'll have the leverage to topple Grayson and anyone else they want. The final choice. The air in the room felt heavy now. The stakes had just escalated to an impossible level. Lena stood. How do we get the list? Daniel's gaze was cold. That's the problem. Grayson keeps it locked up. We moved quickly, slipping into the shadows of the monastery, planning our next steps. Daniel Grayson, the ghost from my past, was now the key to stopping a global conspiracy that could bring down more than just his father's empire. The stakes had never been higher. The vault that held Grayson's secrets wasn't just any vault. It was a fortress inside the heart of his sprawling estate in Switzerland, protected by layers of security, armed guards, and high-tech encryption. Grayson trusted no one, not even his own family, with the things locked away in that vault. It was the reason Daniel had to disappear, and the reason the Syndicate would do anything to get their hands on it. I looked over at Lena. We don't have much time. Grayson's men will be looking for us. She nodded, her eyes cold with resolve. Then we don't waste it. A deal with the devil's hand, we had to make our next move count. If we were going to break into Grayson's vault, we would need access to his security systems, which meant getting past the high-tech surveillance. And to do that, we needed a hacker. Daniel led us through a hidden underground tunnel beneath the monastery. It was cold, damp, and smelled of old stone. At the far end, there was a small door. Behind it, someone who could get us to the vault. You know where we're going? I asked as I glanced at Daniel. He gave a half smile. I know exactly where, to find him. And I know exactly how much he charges. The door creaked open, revealing a small room filled with screens, cables, and a man hunched over a keyboard. He was young, wearing a hoodie, his face lit by the blue glow of the monitors. He looked like someone who lived in the world of shadows, just like the rest of us. Max, Daniel said, stepping forward. We need your help. The man didn't look up. Yeah. I know why you're here. His voice was raspy, like he hadn't slept in days. But it's going to cost you. Big time. I stepped forward. What's the price? Max finally turned around, his eyes gleaming with the kind of hunger I'd seen before in people who held power. I need Grayson's list. The one in his vault. That's the only payment I'll take. Lena's eyes narrowed. And if we can't get it? Max shrugged, unconcerned. Then I'll just find someone else. But you might not be alive long enough to find another way in. I knew Max was playing us, but we had no choice. We needed him. Deal, I said. But if you double-cross us, I'll make sure you regret it. Max didn't flinch. I like a good challenge. The Vault of Secrets. We left the monastery shortly after securing Max's help. It wasn't long before we were on the road, racing toward Grayson's estate in Switzerland. The trip was a blur of thoughts, plans, and questions that kept me awake, even though I hadn't slept in over 24 hours. When we arrived at the estate, it was like entering a fortress. Surrounded by miles of thick forest, the mansion stood at the center, tall and imposing, with high stone walls and watchtowers at every corner. We parked the car in a secluded area outside the estate's perimeter and made our way in, moving carefully, to avoid the patrols. The cold air bit at my skin, but it wasn't the cold I was worried about. It was the ticking clock. Max led the way, slipping easily through the security systems like he owned the place. His fingers flew across his laptop, pulling up a map of the estate's hidden rooms and surveillance feeds. "We're almost there," Max muttered, eyes fixed on the screen. "The vault's just below the main hall. It's heavily guarded, but I've got a back door into the system." I glanced at Daniel. "Are you sure this is going to work?" He nodded. "It has to. Otherwise, we're all dead." The vault door. We finally reached the entrance to the vault, a massive steel door embedded in the stone walls of the estate. It looked impenetrable, but Max was already at work, typing rapidly into his laptop. "I'm in," he said, his voice tense. "But there's a catch. Grayson's got an AI security system that only allows access once every 24 hours. We've got less than 10 minutes before the system locks us out." I could feel the adrenaline surge through my veins. "Then let's move." Max approached the vault door, pulling out a small device from his bag. He pressed it against the wall next to the door, and I watched as it emitted a low hum. Seconds later, the door clicked, unlocking with a soft mechanical whir. The door swung open. The list inside the vault was more than I expected. Safe after safe, each containing millions of dollars in cash, priceless art, and weapons. But in the center of it all, locked in a small, clear container, was what we had come for. The list. I walked toward it slowly, my breath coming in sharp gasps. The weight of what we were about to do hit me like a ton of bricks. If we used this list, it wasn't just Grayson who would fall. It would be the syndicate and the entire network that operated in the shadows. The final countdown. The footsteps grew louder, the sound of boots clattering against the stone floor, echoing through the vault's metal walls. The chill in the air thickened, a wave of realization hitting us all at once. Grayson's men were closing in. They were faster than we had anticipated. It wouldn't be long before they reached the vault. Lena didn't hesitate. She shot me a look. "We move now." Max, his fingers still dancing over his laptop, cursed. "I can't get the doors back online in time. You're going to have to make a break for it." I grabbed the list. The thick yellowed paper felt heavy in my hands, as if it held the weight of the entire criminal world's secrets. Grayson had kept this list hidden, buried under layers of security. If we didn't get it out now, it could be lost forever, and everything we'd done would be for nothing. We weren't going to let that happen. "Get the bag!" I barked at Lena. She immediately grabbed a canvas bag from the corner of the vault and tossed it to me. I shoved the list inside, securing it tightly. The door to the vault clicked as the first guard came into view. Their movements were quick, efficient, trained professionals. We were running out of time. I could hear the sound of guns being loaded. "We're out of time!" Max shouted, panic creeping into his voice. "Go! Go now!" The escape plan I didn't need to say anything. Lena was already moving, taking the lead, her gun drawn, eyes sharp. We rushed out of the vault, making our way through the labyrinthine corridors of Grayson's estate. I kept close behind her, every step measured, every sound analyzed. We couldn't afford to make a mistake. We rounded a corner, and I caught a glimpse of the guards. They were just ahead, closing in, surrounding the hallways. They hadn't seen us yet, but they would, and when they did, there wouldn't be anywhere left to run. "We need to split up," I muttered. Lena shot me a look, the briefest flicker of hesitation before she nodded. She understood. We had to throw them off track, confuse them. If we stayed together, we'd be too easy to corner. "You take the east wing." "I'll go west," Lena said, her tone already sharp, decisive. "Meet at the extraction point." I nodded, turning to make my way down the dark corridor toward the east wing. Max was still behind us, but his eyes darted nervously around, always looking for a way out. We couldn't trust him fully, but in that moment, he was useful. I moved. As quietly as I could, my heart pounding in my chest, every footstep a potential death sentence. The clinking of weapons, the muffled commands of the guards grew louder. They were close. The chase begins. Just as I turned a corner, a guard appeared, and the only thing I could do was run. I heard him shout, and the sound of footsteps behind. Me erupted into chaos. I couldn't risk slowing down. Every door I passed was a potential dead end. Every window was a glimpse of the freedom I longed for. I ducked behind a large stone pillar, hiding in the shadows. My breath was ragged, my pulse thumping in my ears. From here, I could hear the guards moving, closing in. I pulled out my gun, checking the safety. The feeling of the cold metal in my hand gave me comfort, but I knew there wasn't enough time to take anyone down. If I fought now, I'd just end up trapped. The sound of the guards' boots grew louder. They were closing in, too fast. Lena's gamble. Meanwhile, Lena was creating chaos on her end. She'd fired a few shots, just enough to send the guards scattering, unsure of where to focus. It was a gamble, but it had worked. She was fast and silent, disappearing into the shadows, and I had no doubt she was already halfway to the extraction point. I trusted her to get there. I just had to survive long enough to meet her. The ticking clock waited, holding my breath, barely daring to move. The seconds dragged by like hours, but at last, the sound of the guards' footsteps faded. They were searching somewhere else. I didn't waste time. I sprinted again, faster this time, cutting through the estate's dense hallways, knowing every second mattered. I could feel the list burning a hole in my pocket, a reminder that we were on the edge of something that could change everything. Reached the large door leading out into the night. The extraction point. Lena was already there, gun in hand, watching me approach. Her eyes flicked toward the horizon as if expecting the worst. "We've got a few minutes," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "The guards are still searching the estate, but they won't take long to regroup." I shoved the bag into her hands. "You get this out. I'll cover you." Lena glanced at the bag, then back at me, her eyes flashing. "You're not coming with me?" "Not yet," I said, scanning the area. The extraction vehicle was just across the field, hidden behind some trees. "I'll make sure the heat's off you first." Lena didn't argue. She nodded sharply. "Stay safe, Noah." The calm. Before the storm. The night was eerily quiet. The only sounds were the distant rustle of leaves and the steady pulse of my own heartbeat. Lena had made it to the extraction point, and I had managed to cover her long enough to ensure she was on her way out. But now, standing alone in the shadows, I couldn't shake the feeling that Grayson's men were already closing in on me. I had no idea how much time I had left before they regrouped. I was still deep inside Grayson's estate, and the odds of escaping without detection were slim. But I didn't have a choice. The list had to make it to safety, and there was no one else I trusted to get it there. The stakes were too high. Grayson's empire was built on secrets, and we had just exposed one of the darkest. But as the minutes ticked away, I realized that what I had done, the choices I had made, were leading me toward a cliff I couldn't back away from. I took a deep breath and turned back toward the estate. The descent I moved as silently as I could through the corridors, avoiding the few remaining guards still searching the area. But the tension in the air was palpable. It wasn't just about escaping anymore. I could feel the gravity of the situation. Every room I passed, every dark corner I hid in was a reminder that I wasn't just running from Grayson's men. I was running from the entire network. A web of people who wouldn't hesitate to destroy anyone in their way. I reached the main hallway, and that's when I heard it. A soft, hurried whisper behind me. I spun around, gun raised, but there was no one. The hall was empty, only the echoes of my own breath lingering in the air. My senses were on high alert, but I couldn't afford to hesitate. Grayson's estate felt like a maze of secrets, and each hallway I crossed made me wonder just how much of the estate I hadn't seen. The things Grayson was hiding, the things he didn't want anyone to know, but I had no time to think about that. Not now. I had to get to the extraction point. Lena was waiting. The enemy revealed as I neared the courtyard where Lena was supposed to meet me. I slowed my pace, eyes scanning the shadows. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the faint silhouette standing in the distance. At first, I thought it was Lena, but the stance was wrong. The way the figure moved was too controlled, too precise. I stepped forward cautiously, but before I could take another step, the voice came. "You're a hard man to find." My stomach dropped. It wasn't Lena. It wasn't one of Grayson's men. It was Elias Vaughn, the man who had been pulling the strings behind the scenes, the one who had manipulated the situation from the start. He wasn't just after the list. He was after everything. The confrontation. I took a step back, eyes narrowing as I aimed my gun at him. He didn't seem the least bit fazed by my weapon, his hands tucked casually into his jacket pockets. "You're still alive. Color me impressed." Vaughn's voice was smooth, almost mocking. "I thought Grayson's little accident would have taken care of you." I didn't let my guard down, though my mind was racing. How much did he know? What? "Do you want Vaughn?" I spat, my voice tight. He grinned, but it was a sickening, empty smile. "What do I want?" "That's the question, isn't it? You think you're the only one who's been pulling the strings? Grayson doesn't have the real power, Noah. You've been chasing the wrong ghost." I felt a chill run down my spine. The syndicate, the people who were supposedly pulling the strings from the shadows, were nothing more than puppets for Vaughn. "So you're the one behind it all?" Vaughn nodded, his smile widening. "Did you really think Grayson was the mastermind?" No. He's a bluff, a pawn just like you and your little team. The list, the empire, the power, all just pieces of a much bigger game." The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. The list I had risked my life for wasn't just about blackmail. It was about control. Vaughn was the one who controlled it all. He had been the mastermind from the beginning, manipulating both Grayson and the syndicate to set everything in motion. The deal with the devil Vaughn took a step closer, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "You know, Noah, you could have been part of this. You could have been on the winning side, but you decided to play the hero. Too bad." I could feel the weight of his words. He was offering something I could never accept. I wasn't a puppet, and I wasn't about to let him pull my strings. "You'll never get away with it," I said, the words barely escaping my lips. "Grayson won't stand for this, and neither will the syndicate." Vaughn just shrugged, unfazed. "Grayson, he's already lost. The syndicate? They're just waiting for someone to hand them the power. I have what they need. And as for you, well, you're already out of time." I didn't wait for him to finish. The moment he moved, I fired. A fight for control. The bullet grazed his shoulder, but Vaughn didn't flinch. The price of victory. The silence that followed felt like the calm before a storm, a tense quiet that hung in the air like thick fog. Vaughn was in custody, but his words echoed in my mind. "You have no idea who you're really up against." It felt as though we had only scratched the surface of something much deeper, something darker. Grayson was still out there, and the syndicate wasn't finished. They never were. Lena and I stood in the courtyard, the cold night air biting at our skin. The list was secure in my jacket, its significance still sinking in. "What now?" Lena asked, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, a question we both knew the answer to. I met her gaze, the weight of the situation pressing down on my chest. "Now, we make sure Vaughn doesn't walk away from this. We hand him over to the people who can make him pay. Lena nodded. And after that? I thought for a moment. After that, we burn this whole thing to the ground. The escape plan, our first priority, was getting Vaughn out of the estate before Grayson's men figured out what had happened. He wasn't just a prisoner now. He was a valuable bargaining chip, and anyone who knew who he was would do anything to get him back. We weren't far from the extraction point, but there was still the matter of getting through the estate's defenses. The security systems were still up, the perimeter still guarded. If we weren't careful, we'd be walking into a trap. Max had been quiet ever since we'd gotten Vaughn, and I couldn't help but wonder if he was starting to get cold feet. He had his own agenda, and with everything coming to light, I wasn't sure how loyal he really was. We gathered in a small, hidden room just beyond the courtyard, where Lena began pulling up maps of the estate. "We're going to need a new route out of here." Max spoke up, his voice cutting through the tension. "I can help with that. But first, I want to know exactly what you're planning to do with Vaughn." I turned to face him, my hand tightening around the gun still holstered at my side. "We'll take him to the authorities. He's a criminal mastermind, and we have the proof." Max looked at me like I was crazy. "Authorities? Grayson's network runs deeper than you think. If you hand Vaughn over to the wrong people, you're just signing his death sentence. Trust me, the syndicate won't let him go so easily." Lena met his gaze with a cold, calculating look. "Then what do you suggest?" Max hesitated for a moment. "There's another way, a way that keeps Vaughn alive and useful. You'll need leverage if you want to go after Grayson." Lena and I exchanged a look. Max had always played the game with a certain cynical brilliance, but could we really trust him? "What do you have in mind?" I asked cautiously. Max smirked. "We'll play both sides. I know people who want Vaughn alive and who want Grayson out of the picture. If we do this right, we don't just walk away from this mess. We take everything." The deal with the Devil Max's proposal was dangerous, but at this point there weren't many options left. Grayson wouldn't stop until Vaughn was gone, and the syndicate had a vested interest in both of their downfalls. The list was powerful, but if we wanted real leverage, we needed to control both the players and the game. Max led us through a series of hidden tunnels, carefully mapping out an escape route that would take us directly to a private airstrip outside, the estate's perimeter. As we made our way through the dark passageways, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were already too deep, too far gone to turn back now. Max's connections weren't just underground. They were embedded in the very system we were trying to fight. He had friends on both sides of the law, people who would do whatever it took to get what they wanted, and they always played by their own rules. We finally reached the edge of the estate, where an old black SUV was waiting for us, the engine, running silently. Inside the vehicle, a man sat with his arms crossed, his face half shrouded in shadow. He didn't speak as we approached, but his presence was enough to make the tension in the air palpable. Max climbed into the vehicle first, a grin spreading across his face as he greeted the man. "You're late," the man just nodded. "I came as soon as I could." Vaughn was shoved into the back seat, his eyes wide, his hands bound tightly. He glared at me, his mouth still twisted in that cocky smirk. "You think you've won, don't you?" Vaughn sneered. "This won't stop anything. Grayson will burn you all to the ground." I didn't respond. There was no need. Vaughn was about to learn that he didn't have the power anymore. We did. The final gambit. The ride to the airstrip was tense. Every turn of the wheels felt like it could be our last, but Max seemed unfazed, his fingers drumming lightly against the seat. He was waiting for something, a signal, a move from the people he had called in to help.